So carrying on where we left off in the last video, we got this settings menu to slide up with the back arrow and the title, and now we want to do this UI in the center. We also forgot a logout button, which is one of the main purposes I was doing this settings page, so we'll add a logout button somewhere. So let's just get to it. Let's first make sure the solution still builds and that we see what we're talking about with the settings sliding in. Let's make sure Facetto Word is a startup project. And then I think we'll start with the picture, because that's a nice easy one. So we've got this page, we click this button, and the settings page slides up and slides out. So that's still working, so now let's start filling it out. Let's take a look at, we have a grid right now with 2 rows, so we have a second row here for using with the content that we want to use. So let's go and add the main content here where we've made a section for it. We want to have, again, a grid, so we'll probably want a grid with simply 2 columns, and then in here we'll have probably a stack panel. So let's just make a grid with 2 columns. And that wants to be in the current row of the grid it's inside of as row 1. And then we want the column definitions. First width is going to be, now depending on how big the application grows, let's just make it a fixed size for now, and then we'll see how this looks. What I might do is almost make the whole area maybe not a fixed size but have a maximum width, because we don't want it growing huge. So we'll see what it looks like first and then come back to this. So let's set this at maybe, I don't know, 200, and then the other width will take up the remainder of the space. Now inside here we'll have profile picture. This will want a border. What's wrong with IntelliSense? Oh, we're inside the column definitions. So we'll need a border on the profile picture in order to have the corner radius. Set that to maybe 8. And inside here we'll have an image. Let's just quickly add the image backgrounds. Add samples, and then I've got a picture of Rusty on my desktop, so I'll add that, and we should now be able to do image source equals images samples rusty.jpg. / there we go. Then we want the size. Is there a size mode or something? Render size? No. Scale. What's it called? Fill. Oh, I thought it was fill. Oh, I think we need a background brush, not an image. So we'll want the border dot background to be an image brush with a source of images samples rusty.jpg. There we go. And by the default it looks like it's already set to fill anyway. Just to check that, let's do height of 50. No, so it's set to stretch, so we want to change that to I can't think what it's called. So that is it's called stretch. There we go. And we want fill, I think it is, which hasn't changed. Uniform to fill. There we go. And now we can revert that back to there. Now the other thing is we want this to stay square actually, so that's where I want to do height, binding, actual width relative source self. And that keeps it square. So then if we were to make just this designer height bigger, you can see it's square. Now we also want to fix the other issue, which is this needs to be vertically aligned at the top. So that's that. And this picture will want a padding on the right hand side here, or a margin, it doesn't matter which, just do a margin. We'll try 10 initially. So that should be a right border. Just take a quick look at that, visually see, because this should be a fixed width now. So as that scrolls in, and that looks really small actually compared to what I thought it was going to look like. So we'll make that bigger. I think we'll also centralize, because as you can imagine when you expand, you don't want this all the way over here. You want sort of a max width. So I think we'll, just so we can visualize it for now, or in fact we'll set a min and a max width maybe. If not, we'll just set the entire size of this grid. So I think we'll start with, let's just set the width of the grid to, I don't know, 800 or something. And then we can get rid of the designer width and height completely. And then zoom that out to 50. So 800 looks a bit big, let's try 700. Now the other thought is actually, let's not do that. What is the minimum window width? That's the dialog. Main window is 800. So the window width can only go as low as 800. So 700 is actually an okay number. So let's just make the width of this 700. This then clearly wants to be larger, so let's try 300. And let's see what that looks like. And this is kind of doing not necessarily, well, it is a fixed size. The thing I always say not to do. I think in this situation, it's sort of, it's going to work better because we want it centralized. So I think that's a little bit too big now. So let's just drop that to say 260. So also just make this background red a minute because that didn't seem to align where I expected when I maximized it. Oh yeah, there we go. So when the content's in, you'll get a nice, because I'm on a really large screen, so this is 4K, so obviously this is oversized, but that gives it a good size. Now we shouldn't be able to minimize past, which is good. So I think that'll work. Keeping sort of the settings in the center is going to work. Now let me just double check. I didn't see. So now there's an issue I've just noticed. All the animations are animating out at the moment, which they shouldn't be. I just noticed that this was fading out and the other thing was fading out. That should not have been happening because in the animation we have a check that, and I've got a feeling it's to do with this first load and this 5 millisecond delay before we do the animation, but no, because of its first load. Ah, yeah, so there's an issue, maybe. Yeah, that is the issue. So if it's first load, we've got this delay for size and then animate. So we've got this 5 millisecond delay, but then again, that isn't the issue. Because when we do the animation, we're checking here its first load for the animate from left for all of them. So when we first come in, and let's do the fade in, it's not the fade in, it's slide in from bottom in reverse. Double check we hit this a minute for the settings page to move out the way. And as I think you can see there, it's visible at the start, which is, you know, to be expected, I guess, but it might be worth. I thought we explicitly set that to collapsed whenever we updated the value. Or is that inside the do animation? So first load is true. We go in, add slide to bottom, so it's 0. So I want to animate to 0 and fade out and begin and be made visible. So it should. You're not really seen there. So we've actually told it to not to animate with 0. I think the issue is even with a 0, it's basically animating. So to double check that, if we change that to 3, we should see it slowly animating out. So that's there. So let's try and fix that instead with, if we have, and this will be hopefully in the core, it's in everyone, add slide to bottom, add fade out. So a quick fix for this, I'm thinking, is basically if we have 0 seconds, don't bother doing any kind of storyboard, just simply make the element hidden. So we can just do a quick check here if seconds equals 0, elements hidden. So if we don't want to see any animation, make the element hidden with a 0 animation storyboard, it still animates out. So as you see, we actually do set it to 0 and we start a storyboard and we tell it to be 0, but as we noticed, well, maybe the video recording picked it up, but you can see it slowly animating out, well, rather fast animating out when it's at 0. So if we run this, you see we've got 0, we know we have 0. If we just comment this out a minute, and let's see if you can pick up the red. So you see that red was there for a split second, which is not what we want. So hopefully this should fix that red from being visible. So no. Okay, let's just change that to 3. Change that back to 3. So I'm explicitly checking for a value 3 just to be sure that we don't see the animation. So it's basically not, it's not working this invisible. Oh, I know why, because we set the visibility here again. So that's why you have to do a double check here. Just change that to 0, change that back to 0, and that back to 0. And we still see it. Now I'm guessing that's for the 5 millisecond delay. So I think what we might have to do is get rid of this check here, because we're going to keep it hidden. We do a check that make it visible only if we are animating, because 0 seconds means no animation. We'll have to apply this to all the animations, but then we want to go to the step above this that is doing the actual very initial await here. So before we do the await, we want to simply say, if it's first load, I think we just simply want to make the element, mind you, we might get a load of flickering then if we're animating. And do we have the animation value here? Do animation. It's going to be a tricky one actually. Let's just see if this gives us any kind of visible issues. Just by default make it hidden. So we simply start the element as hidden, then we do a delay, then we do the load, and then we show it if it's meant to be visible. And this should now get rid of the glitchy. So there we go. Couldn't see anything there. Definitely didn't see the red. Just look out for the menus. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure there everything that was appearing now doesn't. And then hopefully that still works. Yep, and that still works. Yeah, so that's Let's fix the issue with that slight glitch. So we hide the element here before we have this delay to calculate sizes. Otherwise, it's visible while we're calculating sizes. So we just need that line to fix. And then do we need anything else? Did we do any specific thing in here? No, we did one other thing actually, and that was to check this. Let's see if that's even needed. I don't think it is now. I think because I think it was just a 5 millisecond delay. Yeah, so, oh no, there we go, I just saw that animate out. So this is needed as well. But then again, why did I see that animate out? Oh, because this is using the same one, yeah, fade to bottom. So we do need this check. So a storyboard with 0 seconds of animation still animates, which is very interesting. So bear that in mind, and let's just quickly patch up all of these. So before making it visible, we want to just cut that bit, don't we? Before we make it visible, we check if we've even got any time, and then if it is, we make it visible. Otherwise, you see that tiny little animation, which is really annoying. So a slight deviation off the settings page, but something that needed fixing as soon as I noticed it. We can't just leave that in the application because that'll just really annoy me over time. And it's only taken a few minutes to debug and fix anyway. And then this is a marquee animation that I made for one of the viewers that wanted to do a scrolling marquee. So that is, I'll leave that one as is because it's a little bit more complicated. So that should be all the animations fixed. So back to what we were doing now, which is get rid of the red background. So that's a profile picture done. On hover, we want a little ... button to change profile picture, and then when they click that, they can browse for a picture and upload the picture. So that'll be obviously in the future when we've got the web server up and running and we have somewhere to upload that picture to. So for now, I think I'll just leave that hover off because that's going to be a good while away until we get around to changing that. But it's just a simple animation and a button inside there, so it's nothing hard to add back in the future. So now we want a stack panel here in the second column, and then we'll have, or we can either have, a stack panel is going to be easier, and then we'll want to make a style for this kind of. We could make a user control here for, having a name and a value, but then each one is different. So like the password, we're going to have fading out and showing 2 password boxes or 3, like a confirm, old password, new password, confirm password. This is just going to change to a text box. So I don't think it's not a large enough task to need really a user control. I might change my mind, but we'll start off with a standard, just making it, and then we might turn that into a user control. This is profile details. This will be a stack panel on column 1. And it's going to be a label, text, his name. And this will obviously go into its own stack panel. Well, stack panel or grid. We'll do grid. Or do we? We want the whole thing to be in a grid actually, so we can do columns. No, so this will be in a grid so that whatever the biggest length here is. So change that from stack panel to grid. Then we want grid.column definitions. Column definition width equals auto, so just take up the desired size. column definition, width is whatever's remaining. Then we have the label. Let's have a few labels. Not column. Row 1. We also need to do the row definitions. The height will be auto for everyone. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to have a 5th for the full length, and we'll have a 6th for fitting the button under here somewhere. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Last one will take up the remaining space. Then we have a name, username, email, password. Or username, password, then email. So there we have those labels, and you can either put them all in one row like that and then values in another, or you can just rearrange them as you please because you're explicitly setting the row, so it doesn't matter about order. Then over here, this is still just a text box, and what's going to happen is when the user clicks here, then it's going to change this to a text box to edit, and that'll change to like a plus and a cross. So let's go ahead and make this content. Text, well, it's a label again technically, but I think text block. I can't remember which one I prefer to use, probably text block instead of label actually. Because it's always going to be text. So text block, text, and malpass. Grid.column is 1. And that's now shrunk everything down. And we want all of these to have the padding around them. And the one downside to a grid in WPF is the lack of being able to put padding, you know, cell padding. And you can do it with making a custom grid and code behind and all kinds of things to, you know, have padding in a grid. And I think one way we can do this is if we do an attached property on this grid. So let's first take a look at what a grid is, because it's a collection. Obviously we want a collection object there, so it's a panel, and then it's a framework element. So we're going to have to go to the panel level then in that case. So if we make an attached property, and we call this panel panel child margin property. I think we have been calling them property. Yeah. And rename the file. And then on the value changed, we now know it's a panel. And we want to, so this is the grid, but we'll call it the panel. Because there's other types of panels, if you will, that follow this behavior, just they have children. So we will get the panel, which is the grid, and then for each child in there, or rather, we might want to, will this be fired once it's loaded, or will it need loading? No, this will be fired before it's loaded. So we'll do panel.loaded plus equals, and we don't want to do an automatic, an actual thing, we just want to do a send an event. Get rid of this auto-generated one. Wait for panel to load. Then we'll have panel.children, or for each var child in panel.children, they are of what kind? UI element collection. So that's going to be what, a UI element? Let's cast that to a framework element, which is basically the lowest UI element we can get to of any practical use. Use var instead of it's going to complain at me. That's my own coding standards telling me to use a var there. So I'll just explicitly cast it. So loop each child, set its margin to the given value. So we'll have child as framework element. Then I guess do margin was new thickness, and we're going to expect we can do some parsing here, but I'm pretty sure we can parse it from a string somewhere. Oh, I think it's a thickness converter. So when you do it in XAML, when you simply type in like margin, like here, and this is a string, as you can see, and it just magically turns into a thickness. But in code behind, we don't have that luxury. So what XAML does is basically use a thickness converter, and the same for like double, well not double, things like padding converter, and well again not padding because that's the thickness, but there's multiple converters that pass in strings. So you can create a new one and you can convert from string, and we can then pass in the value, which is e.newValue, which I think is a string, no, as string. And then that, finally, we can cast the whole thing to a thickness, like so. So I think this long thing should basically take in a string value and convert it to a thickness to set the margin. So that means we can specify a single margin, 2 for being left, right, top, bottom, and all 4 for being individuals. So that means we just loop and set the margin. So that's actually all we should need. So that's a nice, quick, simple attach property. And how I expect to use this now is to do here with local colon child margin of value is, say, 10. Let's make nice big. That should work when we compile. Build error unknown 10. Oh, have we specified the type? Where's it gone? Panel child margin. So we forgot the type here is thickness. We're expecting, well, actually, we're expecting strings because we're going to convert it from a string to a thickness. Which, interestingly, we might be able to pass in a margin. It might automatically convert, but I don't think so. So there you go. You can actually see it's already worked in the compile time. So now we can change this one value, and you have to compile because it compiles the thing, but we can now effectively set, think of this almost as the cell padding, you know, the cell margin, if you will, around each individual cell. So we can give that a nice value now and specify, there we go, like a decent padding around each thing. That's just one of many ways of doing that, but I thought that was a nice, fairly quick and easy way. So back to where we were. I've noticed these labels now want to be bold. So we could make a style again, but how simple this is for now, let's just get things in. So font family, we'll set after the grid. And let's have a quick look at this. I just want to visualize this in the actual application as well. Oh, I broke something. Because now nothing's loading. What if I broke? Is that my animation? I think my animation just broke everything. So when we did all this fix for setting all these values to hidden, it seems to have all of a sudden broke And I swear we tested that. Like this slide in. So is it because... Oh, if it's equal to 0. Oh yeah, that's right. No, that's wrong. The whole logic I did was back to front. So if it isn't equal to 0, you make it visible. So it wants to animate, you make it visible. Don't know how I overlooked that and did it for every single one. So if it isn't equal to... Which also begs the question, why did it work in the first place for getting rid of the red? Oh, I know, because then it was never shown. And then when we clicked it, it got shown. So that was why it worked. So we now want to make sure that, keep an eye out that the red, we'll change the grid back to red, bright red, so it's really obvious if it's there or not. And we'll make sure we still have a fix for that. And this is really where we want to start adding some shared logic to this. So like almost this set of code that's repeating. We want to maybe try and add some logic there. So let's just go back and make this grid red. And let's just make sure we can't see it. Or dark green will do, whichever. So there's nothing there. Now we've got the side menu. So if we missed one off. Animation, base property. That wasn't it. So slide in from left. I'm sure this is the side menu. And seconds is doesn't equal to 0, so it stays hidden. Ah, there we go. So this is because we want the side menu to simply be there initially. So we've also got the case where certain animations are, even though they're at the first load doesn't necessarily mean we don't want them to be there. Like the side menu. So it gets a little bit tricky. So let's go and have a quick look at that. This is kind of a half animation video and half other video. Cannot create instance of settings control. Why not? Okay. Okay, we've got another problem to also look at quickly, which is settings control for some bizarre reason doesn't want to get created. And I know why, because again an attached property has been added. So I'll guarantee my attached property is what's causing the funny issue there. Clean everything. Build everything. Nope, you can't give me any more info. Just creating an instance, okay. I do suspect it's that property though. Just remove everything from it. Or rather, let's get back to where it was working, which is without this grid. And failing that, we will. Yeah, so it looks like it's this grid, which I still say it's this. It's either this or this. Now, I highly suspect it's this. It just doesn't seem to update accurately enough to reflect that. So if it isn't that, then is it this? Okay, let's just quickly close and open this. Do a complete clean. Then go to the actual project. Close this down. Delete the VS folder. delete the bin, and this is how you do a complete clean of your project. We've done this before in a previous video, but just to get rid of any. Let's reopen that now. That's just a complete clean of all the WPF state, because I suspect it's perfectly fine. It's just in a strange state where it doesn't want to compile fully or clean fully. So there, now it's quite happy. There we go. Cannot create instance of settings control. So it is having an issue, and it is with clearly with the grid, and I still suspect it's with this. So let's try and remove that. Just remove that completely. Build, and let's see. So it pretends it isn't. So if we do that, see, now it's happy there, and yet with either of them in, one or the other, it's simply complaining. Now, so it's definitely okay. So it's complaining about the profile picture only. Let's remove this height binding. Let's actually close that and remove that. And let's see if it's this binding of height to keep it square. No. Image source. Really? So it does not like an image source. Okay, so maybe it's just simply the path that we've specified it doesn't like. Yeah, so it's something to do with this path it doesn't like. So I've got a feeling it simply doesn't like this image brush somehow. I think it's just again a little glitchy bug in the XAML in creating. It doesn't seem to want to create an image brush from a path at design time when it's embedded in another, a higher level thing. So although this clearly works, and if we run it, it works, we're going to end up with this annoying, really annoying complaint here. Let's just flip around how we do this to the same way we did the main window. So we'll wrap this in a grid. We want the grid to have the margin. So that can then get rid of the margin. The height is, we can chuck that on the grid as well to make it square. And then this background brush, let's just get rid of. We might have to do a uniform. It's going to be the other issue, doing a uniform to stretch thing again. But let's just roll with it for now. Chuck this border inside the grid. Give it the corner radius, and this time we'll have that stretching to. Just complaining about one over there. We'll have this, basically now this grid, if we did a background of red, you'd see this grid fills the whole thing. So we're going to use that as the opacity mask. And we're going to do, it needs a name to be able to be found. So we'll call this mask. And then we'll now have another element, which is the one we originally wanted, which is now just going to be, I think it can technically just be the image directly. The source will now be images, samples, rusty.jpg, and image.opacity mask, visual mask, framework element, UI element, what's it called? Maybe framework element? Nope. Oh, visual brush. Yeah, visual brush. Then it is the... Actually, let me just search because we've already done this. Visual brush, and we bound it to a container. So visual, that was it. So the visual is now binding to the mask. And that should... That should have just cut the borders. So maybe we have to move that outside and chuck this in a grid. And then have grid.opacity mask. And then have the image within that. Nope. Oh, I know why. This has got a transparent background, so we need to set it a colour. There we go. So now we have, and that actually looks like it's filled. So I already basically filled the, done like a uniform to fill by default. No, it's basically done a fill. It hasn't changed its height. So let's just add the stretch back to uniform to fill, and then change the height to 50. We should get exactly the same behavior. There we go. So we've now got exactly the same thing. It's a little bit more cumbersome, but it's the only thing that allows us to, well, we haven't even seen if this works yet, but see if this now, hopefully, fingers crossed. Ah, really? Let's compile. Ah, there we go. I thought we'd still got the same issue. So that's got rid of the compile issue here. So that's all in. We now just need to... Okay, something's going on with these. This animation thing's really getting annoying. It's now like you have to compile, or rather when you come in and out, it makes itself visible again. And then like you go back, come forward. Well, I only have to compile, it looks like, but there's again clearly some design time glitches going on with that. Okay, let's just finally fix this side menu animation. So what we have here is an animate in from left of side menu visible, and that should actually animate in. So slide in from left. So let's just see why that isn't animating. So the value is animate in, which it should be. We open up. So animate in, it's the first load, which is fine, because we want it to be visible. Slide in from left. Ah, now the problem is seconds is 0, because it's the first load, because it's the very first state. If you, by default, if you're there, you're in the first state. So really, we also want to pass in the true value, you know, whether it's true or false, or let's actually fix it in this part here. So start off hidden before we decide how we animate. If we are to be animated out initially. So this would be a value basically, which is the, you know, animate in or out. So if animate out by default, okay, value equals false because it's an object. No, okay, let's just do a cast. So basically, if we're saying animate out by default, then make it hidden, otherwise show. So now the side menu should finally show. There we go. So let's fix the animation issues. They still work. Now we have a settings menu with a picture. This looks a bit small, but we don't want to go, well, is it small compared to, no, it's actually okay. But this padding looks not big enough to me compared to, And then also you'll notice when we animate, when it's not in focus, so if we move it to there and change the picture to focus, do we want this fading over the top? I think so. Just gives it a, you know, that was the whole thing we added, and it looks nice there. I'm just thinking settings wise, but I still think it looks good, so let's keep that in. So we need more of a space in here, and then more of a space in there, which is internal. So this is where we want more padding that way than, so more left and right padding than top and bottom. So this is where we'll see if our margin attach property works for multiple values. So now I think it starts with left and right. So let's try 15 left and right, 10 top and bottom. And whoa, that's gone spacey. Okay, top and bottom, let's stick to 5. There we go, let's have a look at that. Oh, I swear I've just seen that animate out again. Let me see. Yeah, I'm seeing this animate out. I'm going to ignore that for the moment because I spent half the video fixing an animation. So that looks like... that looks okay. So now we need the underlines. We want a little bit more space in there. And then we want the underline to each box. So we'll have, and this is where I think it'll become beneficial now to turn this into a user control. Otherwise, you'd have to have, say, the individually adding an underscore to each property, which we definitely don't want. So actually, I'm going to leave out the underline, and in a new video, because this is dragging on a bit now, the next video will turn it into a user control, each one of these. So that looks more spaced out. Let's just fill in these properties just so it's visually nicer. So we've got contents, and this is grid.row equals 1. And that's grid.row equals 2, 3. And then this will be username Luke. Or what did we put in the example? Yep, username Luke. Password is going to be, well, that was actually just going to be a static. You don't want to give away the length of anyone's password. You simply want to just put some visual in there. So that will literally just be this exact box like that. And this will be my email. So let's see what this looks like. So there we go, we're starting to get a nice appearance here. We'll then want the on hover to show a button. But because that button is going to be, we don't want to start adding too much to this grid, knowing that we're now going to turn it into a user control per item. So again, we'll do that in the next video, so that each one of these is like its own user control and with an underline, and then we just simply stack them on top of each other. Then we'll add all the view model binding to bind to this properly. So I expected to get this whole thing done a lot quicker than this, but again, we have spent a lot of time patching up animation things and a bug with the designer here. But again, it's good to see what happens when you're really designing instead of just skipping over and not showing you what goes on. So we've got this so far. We've got this nice UI starting to match the screenshot. And it looks a bit bigger in the screenshot, but I think that's about right for size. We don't want to go too big. And then once we've added these buttons and the hover effects, you'll start seeing it come together, and when you click them, you can then change your name and click save or cancel. And again, we'll bind that fully to a view model that's ready to physically save those settings and get those settings, and that's where we then have our database come in, where these settings are really stored. Or in terms of when this is a web application, that would actually be pulled in from the web server, not directly from just our own cache. So it's, again, we'll do a binding enough to show that process. And then I think I really want to fix why this thing is we keep going from a fixed animation to a broken animation, and then this is really annoying as well, why this keeps happening. So I'm just going to pause the video on this and figure out why we're getting these two glitches so you don't have to sit and watch, and then I'll simply start the video and show you the solution, what it was. But we've obviously got some issues with design time firing events like this, which has now made it visible, because it's no longer the first, I guess the element's loaded, so it's no longer the first load, and then when it's coming again, it's decided to show the element. So I think I'm just going to simply do a ignore design time on the animation, and simply, you know, we just need some more handling of design time visuals, and then obviously to fix the issue with why those animations are still showing. So like I say, I'll just quickly pause the video and figure out why, and then I'll let you know what it is. Okay, so that took a little bit of digging, took about 15 minutes to figure out. What was happening is on the animate menu, the attachment menu, we were getting 2 of these fired, so 2 unloaded events fired, and it was due to this delay here, in some kind of weird way, that because one of the things you do when you do this self-unhookable event, it's my fault there, when we added this delay to fix another issue, I put this delay before unhooking our own event. This should always be the way it works. You create the event, you fire it, and it instantly unhooks itself. Otherwise, adding this delay somehow allowed WPF, well, we know how it allowed it because we had a delay, but basically WPF decided to fire off 2 of the same event. It actually fires the unloaded more than once. So we were then getting called in to do animation twice or 4 times, depending on how quick your computer runs. And then obviously in do animation, we then bubble down to if it was first loaded, whether we animate or not. And because it was the second time around or the third, it did a 0.3 second animation. So to fix that issue, I first moved up the unloaded here to unhook instantly. And then just as an extra failsafe, because, well, in fact, my other failsafe won't really matter now, but what I did as well in an attempt to fix this was, if the value doesn't change, we had one issue where we were comparing a object here, which should be a boolean, and an object here of a value, and we were doing a direct object to object comparison, not boolean to boolean. So I had to explicitly cast these two, otherwise this check would fail anyway. And then finally I added this first fire event, which is just a boolean again, a flag, that simply, all we do this check in the first place for, and this was originally first load here, is that we, on very first load, a default boolean value is false. So when we set an animation by default to be false, if we did this check and they both match and we returned, we'd never do the animation for animations that want to start off in the hidden state. So this was to fix that issue originally, but the check was never truly working. And then because we had this delay in here on the loaded, in fact we still have the delay, because we don't set the first load to false until it's loaded. So we'll keep this fix in here, because this is a true check that do the values match, or is it the first time we've ever had this value, i.e. the default value being, you know, the first value coming in. Then as soon as we've had that, we then change it to false, so the next time if we get a value updated and they're the same value, don't bother doing anything. So there's a few checks here, but basically we had a boolean here of first fire. We changed this from checking first load to checking first fire, and we set first fire right after the check. We fix this comparison with a boolean, and then finally we unhook instantly instead of after the delay. So there's quite a few little fixes there, but now when we run, we don't see any animation of, you know, the things that shouldn't animate. So everything's disappeared initially and shows correctly, which is what we wanted. So I didn't want to bore you with all that debugging of an animation because we already did enough of it in the video. So that's the animations fully fixed now. We have the settings menu sliding up, we've got a picture, we've got some content, and we're ready to move these into a user control next, and then add the real function to be able to click and edit. So that's going to involve creating the view models for them, you know, the settings view model, binding the data to them, handling the click to show an edit text box with a save and a cancel button. Same for that password, that'll be 3 password boxes will appear. So again, we'll make we'll have to make two user controls here. There'll be one for a text box when a text box appears here, and there'll be one specific to a password that'll, when you click, it'll show 3 password boxes, the original, new, and confirm. And then all of them are going to have the save and the close, and that'll all link back to a view model as well to do the real action. So that'll be in the next video. And again, sorry it was a little bit of a slow video and a lot of debugging, but that's part of software development, so I'd like you to see at least some of that, if not all of it, to understand how to solve problems. So again, any questions, let me know. Next video should be hopefully in a few days, as long as I get the time, and we'll carry on and finish the settings page up.